Jessica Yanes, and today I'm going to talk to you about the Critter digital story that I experienced with my mealworms from start to finish, and I cannot wait for you to see the great things that I've learned throughout the process of this. So I began my mealworm experience by going out to the store and figuring out where is it that I could buy mealworms. But after doing some research, I did find that Petco or any animal store could have mealworms. So I sure did go to Petco and bought a 35 pack, which worked out. So myself, along with 2 other friends from class, were able to each get 10 mealworms, even with some of the mealworms, which you can see now, were still living. However, some were dead, which I was told that there might be some dead. You could tell by the color of a mealworm. A mealworm that is live and thriving is usually the brown, and if you leave them around, they do move. However, the ones that were dead seemed to be dormant, which they did tell me. The Petco lady said that they tend to stay in the dormant stage when they stay in cold refrigerated temperatures. So if I wanted to keep them alive for longer than the time that I needed them for, I could keep them in the fridge. However, I needed to see the reactions and observations, so I was able to keep them at room temperature. And so in the images that you can see the exoskeletons, which is just the outside of mealworms once they transition from one stage to the other. You can see mealworms, and somewhere in between all of them, you can see the larva stage. So the larva stage is when they're mostly dormant, and I do have a clip where I was able to move them around, and they would move within their larva. So that was very interesting for me to see and enjoy. And then this image next is the image of a beetle, which is in their adult stage of the mealworm cycle. So it was very interesting to see the mealworm cycle just in a container habitat that I've created myself. One really cool thing that I did notice was the color change from the day that the beetle was beginning to the day 2 or 3. They went from very light, which you can see, to a very black color. So the change had a lot to do with the light or no light, in my opinion, and it was very interesting. So for my first experience with the mealworms/beetles, I did do the apple test. So in the apple test, I went ahead and put an equal amount of mealworms and beetles in a separate, larger habitat for me to see the movement of them and the reaction of the apples through a time period of different trials. So I did do 3 different trials with both the beetles and the mealworms at the same time. And based on the images and the videos, I did notice that both did go towards the apple, just at different rates. So the mealworms, since they are slower in movement, it did take them longer to reach over to the apples versus the beetles. The only issue was that the beetles were not comfortable in this new habitat because there was no foundation for them. So I did notice that they rather wanted to stay together versus even going towards the beetles, towards the apples. So that was very interesting to see the change of habitat and the time that it took them to reach those apples. So for my opinion, I do feel that mealworms thrive more and like apples versus beetles. For experiment number 2, I ended up going with a more fruit, water-based type of vegetable. So I did a tomato, and in this instance, I did use a smaller container since the previous test took longer to see results because of the largeness and no foundation. So I had a foundation of oatmeal in both containers, and I just cut the tomato in half and I placed it in the middle. And both the beetles and the mealworms came towards the tomato and started eating it. So that was a very different reaction compared to the first experience that I did. So I did conclude, based on the experience, that they do enjoy fruit-like types that are more water-based and in a smaller area. For experiment number 3, I went with the light versus dark. And in this instance, like I did in the past, I placed the same number of now all beetles because I had no longer mealworms to experiment. They had all evolved to their adult stage. And I placed the same amount of beetles in two separate containers. One was with no light, everything was covered, and the other one there was light coming into the container. And I did notice that most of the beetles liked to be in the dark. And even when I observed them, just looking at them now, they like to hide in between the foundation that I put either the oatmeal or the rice. So they like dark spaces where they can't really see anything. So this experiment really proved that beetles like to be in the dark, especially to thrive. Even when they have food, they still like to eat it and hide. So this experiment was very interesting and I really enjoyed it. I was had a lot of unknowns in the beginning, but I know that I would love to do the same experiment with my students, even if they were in the first grade, primary levels. This is something that we could do guided and do journal entries just like we did in class and really get to know the life cycle of something else that you don't usually see out in the world. So that was my experience with the critters, and thank you for watching.